On January the 25th, I started a bit of an endurance challenge whereby I ran 128 marathons in 128 days in memory of my brother Connor, who unfortunately lost to suicide in 2018. It was his dream to live in New York. That was where he wanted to live, work, spend the rest of his days, and unfortunately never got to live out that dream. So I decided to honour his dream and his life really, and run the equivalent distance of where me and Connor grew up in Newcastle to New York. On the final day, I finished the marathon inside the Priory Castle. The amount of people that came up to me at the end saying, "Your daily videos kept me going." Yes, people have turned out to support me running, but ultimately this was all for Connor. Often people don't even like to say the word suicide. It's actually quite an uncomfortable word for people to say. I think it's just purely because we don't know how to speak to someone who's been bereaved by suicide. I wouldn't be sat here being able to talk the way I talk about what happened and talk about Connor having not done the marathons. There must have been something inside of me that knew that I needed to do it, and it's changed my parents' life, has really changed our life as a family, and being able to talk about Connor. It's completely changed it into a bit more pride and a little bit less shame, and for me that's pretty amazing really. But I think the amount of people that it's helped, it's made me realise that the domino effect it can have if you're just a little bit more open, those around you will do the same.
It's my belief that too many societal problems persist because we keep relying on the same ways of thinking. Question the Default exists to challenge the norms that shape our society, dismantling the status quo and exploring better alternatives for how we live and manage our health and well-being. Question the Default is for those who are driven to create a better future. If this mission resonates with you, please consider subscribing, liking or sharing. Every single small action helps us on our mission. Thank you. When Lewis lost his brother Connor to suicide at just 18 years old, the world completely stopped. But then, in time, it changed. The grief became a mission, running 128 marathons in 128 days, finishing on the day of Connor's birthday in June. In this episode, we explore what kept Lewis going through all of that pain and how the miles became a space for healing. We look at what he's learned about connection, resilience, and community. A truly incredible person with an amazing story. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Lewis.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
Good, very well. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. A pleasure to have you on. I mean, it does feel a bit surreal when you see somebody for multiple different kind of video clips online, following your journey. I think, it's really exciting to have you on. I think what you've done is incredible, honestly incredible. And I know, and I hope everyone tells you that, but it really is so unique and so rare to see like the size of impact that you had without the intention.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that myself, to be honest.
How do you feel now?
Yeah, it's pretty strange really now, looking back on it. I mean, I'm about sort of 10 weeks after finishing now, so body's recovered, managed to sort of maybe understand a little bit more about what actually I kind of achieved really.
And what did you do in the bottom line, like for people who don't know?
So on January the 25th, I started a bit of an endurance challenge whereby I ran 128 marathons in 128 days in memory of my brother Connor, who unfortunately lost to suicide in 2018. It was his dream to live in New York. That was where he wanted to live, work, spend the rest of his days. And unfortunately never got to live out that dream. So I decided to honour his dream and his life really, and run the equivalent distance of where me and Connor grew up in Newcastle to New York, which worked out as 128 marathons.
And how did you get to the... Yeah, did you sit there, calculate the number?
A little bit. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to do something for Connor, and I never knew what I wanted to do, and I never really felt like I was quite in the position to do it. And then I just one day, probably just on a run, thought, I wonder how far it is to New York, got back and checked, divided it by marathons, and it came to 128, and I sat on it for quite a while, really. And I've got friends who run and family, and my dad runs, and I'd ask people, how many marathons do you reckon you could run consecutively? Just to get a bit of a ballpark without actually telling them what I wanted to do. And yeah, before I knew it, I kind of told too many people.
So you just had to do it.
I think that by that
You were
point
done.
I was done, so I kind of had to do it. But yeah, I think there was maybe also just something inside me that knew that that it would. I don't know. There was maybe something deep down that knew it was the right thing to do in the right time.
Okay.
And yeah, that was just the beginning of it, really.
I can't even get my head around the amount. Had you run a marathon before this?
So I'd never done a marathon in an organised event.
Wow.
And
you'd run the time.
when I decided to do it, I'd never ran a marathon. So I've ran my whole life, but I was more doing like 5K and below.
Yeah.
So I was a bit more, I guess, sort of shorter distance. So when I came up with the idea, I'd never ran a marathon. But in the training up until starting, I'd done a couple. I think I'd done 5 or 6.
It's a small jump.
So yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I always tell people, like, I think what an idiot to think that I could have done it. And I remember telling myself quite a lot, really, was that if my brain's created the idea, then surely it's possible. And that's kind of what I stuck with. So I just kept telling myself, you wouldn't have came up with this if you couldn't do it. And there was days when I was questioning myself. I was asking my girlfriend, like, I'm not sure if this is going to be able, if I'm going to be able to complete this. And then it kind of roles reversed, and she started convincing me that I could. And then I just told myself, you've created this. You haven't decided to break the world record, because to me that's impossible. But I have came up with 128 days, and I think the only reason I came up with that was because it was possible. So that's kind of how
nice.
It sort of domino effect into me actually starting it and planning it.
Incredible. So we're going to get into the kind of depths of that challenge that you set yourself and then completed. But I want to kind of go back to kind of why you did this and why you wanted to, I guess, honour the loss of your brother Connor. And can you take us back to the 2018 and that time for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, so I was just turned 18. It was a month after my 18th birthday. Less than a month, actually, 3 weeks after my 18th birthday. I was still in sixth form. I'd been at sixth form that day. It was a Friday night, and I'd got home, and Connor came into my room and asked if I wanted to go for a pint. And I'd been at sixth form all day. I think I was actually on some sort of like geography field trip, actually in the centre of Newcastle. So I wasn't in the sixth form itself, so I was knackered. And I remember I was in bed by like 6-7 p.m. and he said, "Oh, do you want to go for a pint?" I said, "Oh, I don't really fancy it tonight." That was the last time I ever seen him, and I was probably the last person he spoke to. And I woke up the next morning without a brother. My mum came home from that night shift, and she knew instantly that that's what had happened without even really thinking about it or anything. So we got the police involved, and before I knew it, I started to slowly realise what had happened. But up until that point, I never had a clue about what was going on, or that my brother had these thoughts, or anything like that. So it was really to wake up as an 18-year-old and sort of not know instantly, but slowly start to find out throughout that day. And it was, to be honest, not a huge amount of memory I have really of that day. It's quite blurred, and I just remember that last evening of Connor asking if I wanted to go for a pint, and I said no, which is difficult to look back on and reflect on, really. And
thank you for sharing that. And I know that's going to be the heart of kind of what you're now doing and why you're here. But how I still can see how it's not easy it's never easy, right, to talk about that. But can you tell us more about Connor? I think it's really important that we kind of talk about those that aren't here anymore. And what was he like?
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, that's the beauty of this challenge in itself, is that I've been able to talk about Connor a lot more than what I previously had. So he was a lot smarter than me, a lot more calm and gentle. I think I'm definitely ADHD or hyperactive, can't sit still, and he would always be. Whenever I look back on family videos, and I didn't recognize at the time, but after Connor's passing, and I look back, and there's like videos of me doing backflips in the living room, and he's just sat there, and you can tell he's looking at me thinking, this kid's nuts. So he was definitely a lot more chilled out than what I am, but just really, really gentle person and really kind, and a really good big brother to have as well. Always sort of looking out for me, and Although, you know, you have your standard arguments and standard fights. I've got some good memories of those as well. But yeah, just a really great person.
A Newcastle United fan as well?
Not a massive Newcastle fan, to be honest. Not a big sports person. He was more sort of less into sport and more creative, writing, drawing, art. He was more that end of the spectrum rather than sport.
You know, you mentioned the challenge is giving you a kind of a language almost to talk about your brother. Did you talk about your brother in those years between 2018 and 2025?
No, not really. If ever, to be honest, never between friends. Rarely with my girlfriend. Rarely with parents. I'd been, when I was in sixth form, I was offered sort of counselling and support, and I guess spoke about Connor then, but that was within 6 months of losing him, and I don't think it was the right time for me. But never in a natural context, never when it felt right for me. It was only ever really when it felt like I was in a situation where I had to talk about him because I was getting help. So really struggled to talk about Connor before that, and I think everyone within my sort of small circle didn't really know what to say either. But yeah, starting the marathons, I set out to do a daily video. I thought to try and raise a bit of fundraising, I'll just do a daily video on social media. And I quickly started talking about Connor. And then also as I was doing the marathons, people wanted to come on runs with me. Just as a bit of support more than anything. Good friends, randomers, strangers, people I'd meet in the street. They'd want to join. And before I knew it, they were asking about Connor, and they would ask, oh, did Connor like to run? Or what was Connor like? And then I found myself quite naturally speaking about Connor. And yeah, before I knew it, I'd be at the dinner table with my parents, and now we're talking about Connor. And it just changed the whole perspective of what had happened, and he was no longer the elephant in the room. And I always say as well, there's an element of shame as well with losing someone to suicide, especially in the sort of generation above me, my parents. And doing all these marathons, you know, we'd walk around where we live in Tynemouth, and there'd be such pride because people were so proud of what I was doing, and you could sense that with my mum and dad and with close family, that it kind of changed the whole perspective on what had happened.
It's incredibly powerful, that idea of being able to talk again at a dinner table.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell us a bit more about what that was like? How did it give you a language and ability to do that?
I don't know. I just feel like because everyone was kind of talking about it, and it wasn't even necessarily talking about, oh, Connor took his own life. It was more just talking about the marathons, and because all the marathons were about Connor, it was always just spun that way, and it was never felt, you know, I don't remember during the challenge having conversations at the dinner table with family and being upset. It was often quite reflective and happy, and it was just a completely different tone to what it had previously been, where it was almost too painful to even speak about. But
just don't unbox it.
Yeah, but now we found ourselves speaking about it. And even my auntie, so a lot of my family live in Scotland, my auntie said she'd be going into work and her colleagues to see my videos, and they didn't know what happened to her nephew, my brother. And now they were asking her questions about it, but in a really sort of natural way. And it's just life-changing, really, for what it'd done for even just me, my mum, my dad, and sort of close family. It's pretty immense.
It is incredible, and I'm sure you've opened up conversations at other dinner tables across the UK.
Yeah.
Purely from just going out, running, and never stopping.
And I sort of understand that now, sat here, having finished it, but at the time, I didn't really comprehend what was going on. And it was just felt natural at the time to be doing that and doing these videos. And I had such little time in my day that often I'd be making my video before I'm going to bed, and then I'd wake up and I'd be running. And I never really had much time to reflect on the impact it was having on people. So it's really strange to look back on it now and kind of realise that.
And I want to kind of talk about this kind of elephant in the room idea. I can relate to that a lot. I sadly lost my father to suicide, talking about 18 years ago, and I've lived so much more of my life without him. But I also think back to these kind of dinner moments, and it's really, really strange. But I think at dinner, it's something that everyone does across the world, and most of the time you do it with friends or family. Yes, you can eat alone, but there's a social moment, and it's visible that somebody isn't there. And for me, I always found it harder at birthdays, Christmases, and I through various different forms of therapy and people I spoke to over the years, I couldn't quite pin down why it was those moments, but I always felt that something was missing. It was not like I was in deep thought about my dad. I just knew something was visible in my eye missing around a table, because you knew what it used to be like. And I'm quite passionate about how we bring kind of suicide conversations into those moments of, it's not just kind of dinner table conversation of choice, but it's so important because it changes the dynamic in which families and friends connect on the thing that they know that it's there. Have you seen that with like friends as well and other people in your life?
I think so. I mean, maybe not so much friends, but having finished the marathons, I've done sort of small talks at local schools and things like that. And there's people that have stopped my dad in the street and said, "Oh, my daughter told us at the dinner table last night that we need to talk about how we feel more." And that's like a little 9-year-old girl.
Wow.
So it definitely happens, and I think it's definitely happened as a cause of what I've done. And that's just one case where someone sort of verbalized it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty special to think that little girl's gone home, sat with our grandparents, and said, "Oh, we need to talk about how we feel more." And it's pretty massive. And I completely agree about the elephant in the room. You know, we were a family of 4, now we're a family of 3, and that you really feel that missing person around that dinner table, and as often is the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't know where to. I don't know about you, but I never used to know where to start.
Yeah,
it's like, how do I start talking about this thing? Like, I know it's happened, I know it's here, and then what for me was year on year on year, and I said, it's not talking about it. So it's easy just to give up talking about it. That's how I got to. I think about that, examples like that, where the young girl going back to her family and speaking about mental health. I think as a society, we've kind of lost touch with the small things we can do to help people at that times, the worst points. Did you find it was hard for people to engage with you on a conversation about the topic in the early days?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I remember my memory is pretty blurred during that immediate sort of couple of months after, but I remember one day in particular, one of my close friends at the time came up to me and was like talking about another friend. He said, you know, he says he doesn't know what to say to you. And I think that's definitely a case, especially guys or lads.
Yeah.
I mean, a group of 18-year-olds, do they really know what to say to someone who's just lost their brother to suicide? I don't think I would have known if I hadn't been through that experience myself. So it's pretty difficult, really. And I think it's...
What would you say to somebody now if they're in that position?
As an 18-year-old...
Helping somebody else?
I think the key thing is to talk about them. And I think a lot of the time people felt it was better to not mention it and act like it didn't happen because they didn't want to upset you. But often then I'm walking around knowing that people are avoiding it. And it's that sort of... It's a difficult one, and everyone's different. I don't think everyone reacts the same way twice. So personally, I think talking about Connor's helped me massively.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That kind of the eyes, you're going around living your life, someone who's bereaved by suicide, but you know, in my eyes, I used to remember what people were thinking of me.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was true. I honestly don't know. But I always, now that I can talk a bit more confidently about it, always used to think there was a direct association to my name and suicide. And therefore, whenever people saw my name or saw me, they just thought suicide.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it out of my head. I was just so fixated by it. And it's hard to get away from when you're young.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's... that's definitely kind of, I feel like your journey, I can definitely relate to some aspects that you're talking about for sure. If you're comfortable sharing, what were the hardest parts of the 7 years that you've had trying to make sense of this?
I think the immediate sort of 6 months afterwards were really, really challenging. I was sitting my A-level exams for one, so that was a difficult time. But also just the sheer turmoil at home as well. You know, I've got 2 parents myself. We're all living in the same house, and everyone was grieving differently. And I think I didn't really realise that at the time, and I'd often get frustrated at my mum or my dad. You know, if my mum was feeling particularly down and she didn't want to maybe go out, but I was like, come on, let's go for a coffee. I'd get really frustrated and think, why does she not want to come out for a coffee with me? So I remember those days being really particularly hard, not understanding that my mum was grieving just as much as I was, but in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And then obviously birthdays, anniversaries of when Connor had passed, Christmases are still not nice to this day. And we live in Newcastle on our own. All my family's in Scotland. So, I mean, family would come down for birthdays, but a lot of these big occasions was always just the four of us.
Okay.
So I really felt that loss on those days. So that's probably the most challenging parts.
Yeah. That kind of idea of everyone's grief is kind of very different and unique, and for the most listeners are going to be the UK for us, but for those who can't picture what Tynemouth is like in Newcastle, where did you grow up? What was the location like?
So when my parents moved there, it wasn't really much, to be honest. They've lived there for, how old's Connor, 28? They've lived there for almost 30 years, really. So a huge amount of time, but it's turned into quite a little cosmopolitan hub of bars, cafes, coffee shops. It's got a beautiful coastline, so it's quite surfer-esque. So arguably probably one of the nicest places to live in the northeast. So me and Connor grew up in a pretty beautiful place and had a great childhood, went to good schools locally. So nothing out of the ordinary of any other family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what struck me most as well. You know, we were very, very normal. Parents had normal jobs, police officer and nurse. So there's nothing really that would ever think, oh, well, you know, a bit of a difficult childhood, maybe caused some difficulties. We never had anything like that. So for me, it was always such a shock.
Yeah, that you say is normal.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard then, is it? Because I think sometimes people on the outside will think there's been something wrong.
Yeah.
Has to be something that wasn't right. But actually, you're describing
pretty
safe,
standard.
Stable. Yeah. I think that's hard for people to make sense of, isn't it? Not it's a sad kind of story that you and your family have experienced and a sad loss, but actually just more generally around suicide is that it can impact anyone. It looks very different. There isn't a particular way of being at that time. Like whether you are someone who's thinking about suicide or bereaved by suicide, across the whole spectrum, there's difference and it's unique. I think it's what I love about Calm. Calm do a great job of bringing that kind of unexpected into the conversation around suicide. You know, they had an amazing campaign to raise awareness of the last photos that were ever seen of someone that dies by suicide. You may have seen it. And one of those was actually somebody who just completed a marathon. That was the last photo that was ever captured of this guy. And you think like, he was joyful. Like, I remember this. I can never get rid of this photo. It's a photo from my mind. I say get rid. I can't. It makes me so emotional, and I say that in a positive way. And their campaigns do a great job, I think, of reimagining actually in people's minds. This can look differently to how you probably imagine.
Massively.
But let's get on to the most. What you have kind of incredibly done over the last kind of 6-7 months.
Yeah, 7 months.
7 months. Yeah. Tell us about it, from where the idea came from, running all the way through to kind of getting out to the finish line.
So yeah, as I was saying, I came up with the idea of Newcastle to New York divided by marathons, which was 128 days. And then kind of started telling myself, well, you've created this, so surely you can do it. And that's kind of how I spiraled into actually starting. And then in training for it, I did a couple of weekends where I'd do like a double marathon to just try and see what the body was like. But it got to the point where I thought, I'm doing so many miles in training. I think I just need to start. And I'd always planned to start on January the 25th, which meant I finished on June the 2nd, which would have been Connor's 28th birthday. So that I kind of had a bit of a deadline of when I need to be ready to go. And yeah, I just thought, stuff it, let's just go for it. Without really much thought. And to be honest, I look back and think that I was quite naive, although having completed it now. At the time, like statistically, I probably shouldn't have been able to do it. But yeah, just every day, took one day at a time, one step at a time. And even looking back, I look back on videos now of maybe day 12 and I can hardly run. I can't get out of bed. I remember there's one day in particular, day 14 or day 15, that I had to walk the first 5K before I could even break into a jog. And it's really bizarre to look back and think, what on earth was I thinking when I've got another 113 days left or 100. And it's such a bizarre sensation to think that I actually got through it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess I did every day, did a marathon a day, working full time, and managed to get to June the 2nd and completed it. So pretty incredible, really.
Was there a point that you knew you then couldn't stop because you knew the deadline was there for the 20?
I think as soon as I announced it on social media, I mean, you've kind of put yourself out there. I didn't really put anything out until the week before I started.
Yeah.
I put a video out saying I was going to do what I was going to do. Created a little Instagram page separate to my own personal account to track my progress and to do these daily videos. And I remember putting that on the week before I started, being so anxious up until the day of starting, and even probably the first couple of days, just genuinely scared. I think it would. I mean, it's got to be a challenge. If it doesn't scare you, it's probably not hard enough. And you know, people said, "Oh, well, why don't you do half a marathon a day and you can go halfway to New York and let's kind of meet in the middle?" And other people said, "Oh, you should take a day off," but it just never quite felt quite right. And yeah, 128 days I settled on marathon a day and somehow managed to get through it.
This episode is brought to you in support of Calm, the campaign against living miserably. Calm is a leading UK suicide prevention charity on a mission to help people end their misery, not their lives. We both do things differently. We both know we need to change the conversation around suicide, and that's why together we're both creating space to question the defaults that shape the way we think, feel, and talk about suicide and mental health. We're opening up conversations that remind people, whatever you are facing, you're not alone. Calm has loads of tools and resources available to anyone online to help you find the support that you need, including a life-saving helpline for people open every day from 5 p.m. to midnight, as well as vital online resources for anyone who needs them. So if you or someone you know needs to talk, please visit thecalmzone.net. Thank you for being part of this. And of course, today we may touch on conversations about suicide in this episode. Together, we can question the defaults that keep people silent, smash the stigma around suicide, and help build a world where no one has to face this alone. Thank you. So how did you put this around your normal working day and being a human being?
Yeah.
When did you run?
That was a logistical nightmare more than anything. So on a Saturday and a Sunday, I would just get up as early as I could, 5:30, 6, do the marathon, be finished before 11 or 12. And then that was me done for the day. I had the day to sort of maybe go for lunch, have a nap, recover. But Monday to Friday, I was working full time, primarily working from home. So that does make a difference. So I was doing a half marathon before work, go to work for the day, and then do a half marathon after work. But I also worked away quite a lot. So then that was always an added complication. Trying to travel, trying to work, trying to eat 4,000-5,000 calories a day, trying to recover, and then also trying to run for 4 to 4.5 hours was pretty intense. And some days were just a bit bonkers, but managed to do it. And then also trying to manage relationships, parents, my now fiance, seeing friends on a weekend. So it was a challenge, definitely.
And how has it changed your life? Broad question.
Massively. It's completely changed my life. I mean, I wouldn't be sat here being able to talk the way I talk about what happened and talk about Connor, having not done the marathons. And I kind of reflect on it now and say that there must have been something inside of me that knew that I needed to do it. And it's changed my parents' life. You know, they even say, they'll say themselves that these marathons and having done all this fundraising and raising awareness has really changed our life as a family and being able to talk about Connor. And I can tell that when they walk down the street now in where we live, people don't look at them thinking, oh, that's the poor family that lost their son to suicide. Now it's, oh, that's the couple that have got a son that raised so much money for their other son that lost someone to suicide. And it's completely changed it into a bit more pride and a little bit less shame. And for me, that's pretty amazing, really.
It's incredible.
It's changed my life, which is great. But I think the amount of people that it's helped is really blown me away. I remember on the final day, finished the marathon inside Priory Castle, which is in Tynemouth.
Okay.
And there was probably about 1,000 people, 1,500 people. And there was the amount of people that came up to me at the end, randomers, I've never met them, saying, oh, you know, I've lost my husband to suicide 3 months ago and your daily videos kept me going. Or there was a little boy who'd lost his dad and he'd said, you know, you're my biggest inspiration. And for me at the time was just mind-blowing. So yes, it's changed my life, but I think it's made me realise that the domino effect it can have if you're just a little bit more open, those around you will do the same.
Yeah, it is quite hard to put words to because I'm visualising this in my head. I'm visualising, you know, the North East does have the highest suicide rate in England.
Yeah.
We spoke about this,
Yeah.
you know, but at the same time, the ripple effect of suicide, and we know that those who lose someone to suicide are at greatest risk. So that the fact that you're able to, whether it was intentional or not, group people together in that way in a community is life-saving. And I'm also imagining like how you described your parents and that kind of how the association has changed
Completely.
You know, Connor is at the centre and the heart of that.
Yeah,
but
1,000,000%.
it's the language that then sits around how people's eyes look, and then what that does to your family.
Yeah.
And that, just physically, it's impossible for me not to relate exactly on that point, because I could remember that feeling, and I would watch my mum anxiously getting out to go into her small town, although not in the northeast, in the complete opposite end of the country in Cornwall. I could see how hard it was to get out, and I was just wanting to get out. I would run, I would play football, I would do anything to not be in the house.
Yeah.
And her grief was in the house. And in time, slowly but surely, you can see that changing. So that's what you're describing. Like, how, for somebody who wants to try and change that association, does everyone run? Would you encourage this?
I always say, you know, it's definitely helped me deal with the grief of losing my brother, but I don't suggest that anyone needs to run 128 marathons to do so. But it's more just the talking. And I think especially when it comes to suicide, a lot of people think when I want to talk about someone, you know, I need to go to a counsellor, I need to seek professional help. For me, it was more just talking with friends, family, loved ones. And as soon as you open yourself up and talk about how you're feeling, or, you know, you could be somewhere at a restaurant and you could say, oh, Connor would love this restaurant, wouldn't he? And it's often quite a nice way just to break in and just think of them in a nice way. Oh yeah, he would love this. He loved seafood. And I think just being able to open up a little bit, I've noticed massively has that domino effect. And now people don't feel the same sort of nervousness around the subject around me. And for me, that's massive.
That's massive, yeah. And why do you think people do have that hesitancy? You know, so I asked you earlier about if you were in that position again, what would you advise somebody to do? And you know, you said about the friend who didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like, why do we not do that as human beings, do you think?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I do think about this a lot. And often people don't even like to say the word suicide. It's actually quite an uncomfortable word for people to say. And I think it's just purely because we don't know how to speak to someone who's been bereaved by suicide. And I think it's just the same as anyone else. It's an illness. You know, if you lost someone to cancer, you would want to console that person and talk to them about that person. I think it's the exact same. And I think, you know, just being able to talk about them openly is exactly what that person would often need. Yeah,
because it's impossible for anyone to fix what's happened. You can't solve what's happened, but actually what you can do is you can humanize the situation and humanize the fact that you're still in front of me. I can still speak to you. You're still a human being. Yes, you have this awful amount of pain that you have endured, but you're still human at the end of the day. And the human, although it has to be at the heart of it, we sometimes forget that, and we get this word suicide front and center. Like, oh, we can't. It's impossible to get near. But actually, we just need to remember, like, what does a person need at that time? They need a conversation. They need reality around them, because they're kind of embroiled by stuff that they don't want to be.
And I think it's just maybe because sometimes suicide brings that added complication, doesn't it? Of, you know, so you ask yourself, what could I have done? Or there's definitely an added complication when it comes to suicide around grief. And I think that makes it difficult for people to talk about. And it's not a nice topic. People don't like to even mention it. So just trying to break down that barrier and treat it like any other sort of loss is exactly what needs to be done.
How did you find that then? If you're talking about loss online for you, like say just a camera naturally, and the attention it then got, because you're then talking about suicide, your brother, mental health. Yeah.
I found such comfort in hearing other people's stories. So, if I'd watch a podcast or see a video online and it's someone else that's maybe lost a sibling to suicide, I often found that quite comforting, knowing that there's other people that have been through the same experience, and then maybe they would talk about their experience and that they found it difficult to watch their parents grieve. And I would really find comfort in that. So I found it quite nice to be able to put things out there on social media. And at the beginning, it was difficult. I wasn't natural at all. Speaking in front of a camera, talking about Connor, talking about suicide was really a challenge in itself, as well as the marathons. But then people would start to maybe comment or send me a message and say, oh, I've lost a friend to suicide or a parent, and you listening to your stories has really helped. And I think those sorts of little messages just make it a little bit easier to then continue to talking about it, because I knew that it was being received well, and I knew that it was impacting people positively. And I just wanted to share my story of Connor. I wanted to continue raising money for the two charities that I chose, which was the RNLI and If You Care Share.
Yeah, also a great charity for those that don't know.
Yeah, based primarily in the Northeast. But I just felt that these little daily videos were having such an impact, and some days I didn't want to talk about it. It's not a topic that's nice to talk about. I went from 7 years of not talking about it at all to now 6 months of talking about it every single day.
Every day, yeah.
So often, sometimes it was hard. And if I was on a run and people would maybe start talking about Connor, some days I didn't really fancy it. So there was a challenge there as well.
Yeah, how did you manage that?
I guess I just had to try and force myself to, it did get a bit tiring if people would ask the same question. People were interested in what you were doing, and people would say, did Connor like to run, or what was he like? And there were some days I just thought, I just want to run today. I just want to get this marathon out of the way. I don't want to have too much emotional toll. But yeah, I just had to be open and honest and just say, I'm not really feeling it today. We can have that chat another time, or I would just push myself and maybe talk about him and at a high level. But it's just, you've got to do what feels right for you. And
yeah,
it was hard talking about suicide and talking about Connor every single day, but looking back on it, it was worth every second.
There's something powerful what you said, because you said at the beginning that there was something felt right, timeliness of the fact that you're doing this challenge. Then also the timeliness of actually some days weren't always as vocal. You protected yourself and all of that. And I said, but that was a hard thing to do because people wanted to speak to you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there is that kind of fine line, isn't there? Sometimes it's absolutely incredible what you've done, but actually people need to think about, are they ready to do something in honor and like that?
Definitely. I mean, it took me 7 years, and it wasn't to get physically ready. I always kind of describe the marathons as a bit of a physical journey of actually physically doing the marathons, managing injuries, managing weight loss, but then definitely an emotional journey of managing talking about Connor, managing my emotions. So it was a challenge, and there was definitely days where I didn't want to talk about it, or if I was maybe doing a bit of media stuff, I had to kind of force myself some days, and it was uncomfortable. But it was part of the challenge, and that enabled me to grow. Really, I think was putting myself out of my comfort zone.
It sounds like
daily.
You had a very good support mechanism around you, like in terms of your partner and family and the community that was then that kind of encouragement, it sounded like.
Yeah, massively. I had a huge amount of encouragement, and people were making me food, dropping me off food to keep me going, and there was a big support network to keep me going. But there was also an element of me just being so laser focused that I don't think I really thought about it all too much.
Okay.
And it's probably taken me up until this point now, maybe 10 weeks post finishing, that I'm able to understand how I was feeling at the time or what was going through my head. So it's a bit of a strange feeling now to be finished and look back on it. Because at the time, I probably didn't think that I was having a tough day or struggling, because I was running a marathon. Of course, it's going to be tough. But then looking back, I think, well, I didn't really feel up to that interview that day, and I didn't really feel like talking about Connor that day, but I did. So I definitely push myself every day, physically and emotionally.
Well, talking about the physical impacts, I saw the Instagram post, the one kind of before, after.
Yeah.
Like, can't believe the kind of how your body physically changed. And how are you able to look after yourself day by day?
I didn't overcomplicate it too much. In the beginning, I was focusing on calories and trying to eat a certain amount of calories, and it was just became impossible. I was working, I was running, trying to recover. I just didn't have time to cook or eat as much as I wanted to. So I just made sure that I got at least 8 hours sleep, and I ate as much as I physically could, really. I mean, I didn't have a lot of weight to lose, and I lost probably over about 1.5 stone. So I lost a lot of weight. And that was my biggest concern, really. It was just the sheer amount of weight loss that was happening. And because of the duration of the challenge, it was close to 6 months of doing a marathon a day. And when I tell people I wanted to eat 5,000 calories a day, they're like, oh, that's easy. I could do that. But when you try and do it day after day for 6 months, it's like, that's another challenge in itself. So the getting the calories in, managing injuries, and it was just all one big logistical nightmare, really, trying to do everything in one day.
What was the hardest day?
There's probably one day in particular that was the hardest, where I was working down in Kent, and I did 10 miles before work, went to work, and then I had a train home from Kent to Newcastle at 4:30. Got home at about 9:45, and I had 16 miles left. So I had to go out for 16 miles at 10 o'clock at night, and I think I finished at 11:57.
I was going to say I wouldn't be finishing that.
And I remember my dad, because he actually came out with me. He's like, I'll come out.
He's a keen runner?
He's a keen runner.
Okay,
so he came
helpful.
out with me. He was running along the seafront. I remember vividly.
Yeah.
He kept checking his watch, and he was like, you need to hurry up. He's like, we're not going to get back before midnight, because it was a marathon a day. And he's quite like to the letter. So he's like, you need to get back before
Police
midnight.
officer.
Otherwise you've failed. So I remember just running along, telling him where to go, and I'll be fine. Don't worry. We did it with minutes to spare.
Very good. Very good.
So that was a difficult day, definitely.
And so you're there day by day, and you're building up to the most important day, really, which is, you said, the 2nd of June?
2nd of June, yeah.
And how were the days leading up to the 2nd of June? And then could you tell us about what the actual day itself was like for you and your family?
Yeah, so I remember leading up to the 2nd of June, leading up to finishing the challenge, really, was a bit of an oxymoron, because the lust to want to finish was so strong. But also I think I was able to appreciate that, this is the final week of doing these marathons, and I had every day. I mean, there was people that joined me, but I had 4 to 4.5 hours a day of being with my own thoughts, being outdoors, thinking about Connor, being able to process a lot of thoughts and grief that I didn't get to do. So there was a bit of trying to manage, wanting it to all end, but also trying to enjoy these last few runs, because I'm never going to do something. I'm never going to be in that position again, doing those daily marathons at that time. So it was that leading up to it, and it was building a lot of momentum in the final few weeks. There was a lot of interest, and a lot of people wanted to maybe join on runs, and there was a lot of people that wanted to maybe do an interview or do podcasts, and it did get quite overwhelming at one point. So I tried my best to just look after myself and enjoy the final few runs leading up to the final day. And then getting to the final day, so I'd kind of decided that I wanted to have the first half of the marathon to myself. I'd spent a lot of time on my own. So I had the first half of the final marathon on my own, and I opened up the second half from anyone could join, from a half marathon down to a 5K within my sort of local town. So I think by the final 5K, there was probably about 400 people running along the seafront in Tynemouth and Whitley Bay. So I remember doing that and just being absolutely blown away by the amount of people that had turned up to run.
Did you ever turn around?
So when we were running back, I was kind of in the middle.
Okay.
And I remember turning around, looking behind me, and I remember looking forward, and I just couldn't see the end. It was just hundreds of people, and all the cars were stopped because we took over the whole road. And I can remember it vividly, almost laughing to myself, thinking just, this is absolutely bonkers. And also thinking, yes, people have turned out to support me running, but ultimately this was all for Connor on his 28th birthday. So it was really quite special. And then finishing into the castle. So everyone that joined for a run got into the castle before I'd finished, and I came in last. and entering the castle, I remember just waves of faces, and it was just never ending. And it was obviously quite emotional. You know, it was overwhelming, and I was emotional coming through the finish, but I never felt sad. Every year, Connor's birthday is just an awful day, and it's just such a horrible day where you never really know what to do with yourself. Do you go out for a meal? Do you celebrate it? How do you recognize that day? And it was probably the first birthday of Connor's that we as a family have shared that was filled with joy, really. There was a lot of tears, don't get me wrong. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but finishing that final marathon with probably about 1,500 people turning up, beautiful evening inside the castle, was really, really special. And then I also had planned to propose to my girlfriend at the end. So it was what is normally a pretty awful day for us as a family was probably one of the best days of my life, really, and probably will be for as long as I live. But as well as that, it was the day that I realised the size of what it had become. So throughout the whole thing, I was just so focused on doing the marathons, getting the food in, doing my daily video, go to bed. And then it got to that final day, and I didn't really do many videos. I wasn't really focused on anything else other than just everyone that had turned out for me and Connor. And yeah, like I said, the amount of people that came up to me after saying, you know, we've just lost someone to suicide, and watching you do what you've done has given us hope. And it's even now, it gives me goosebumps to even think about it. So maybe there's a little bit of I feel like I found a bit of a calling or a bit of purpose where, you know, me talking about Connor and talking about this and doing these endurance events has helped so many people. And that's just people that have verbalized it to me. You know, there could be people sat there who have been inspired or have been helped along through a difficult time and not said anything. And it's massive.
Totally. I bet there are so many of those people that are just taking it in their own kind of stride, quite literally, and just watching, consuming, taking what they need.
Definitely. And there's a lot of people that, you know, had no sort of association with suicide or mental health, but a lot of people came up to me and said, you know, watching you do those daily marathons has made me think, well, if he can do 128, I can do one. Yeah. So there's a lot of people that had entered marathons or half marathons. And I think there's a massive correlation between exercise and good mental health. So although they might not need it right now, I always use the example, my manager at work started Couch to 5K. Yeah. She might not need that sort of physical exercise now as a bit of an aid to help her mental health. But down the line, she's now got running as a tool.
Totally.
And even that, I'm pretty proud of people even just coming up to me and say, oh, I'm doing a marathon because of you. It's like, I can't quite comprehend that I've managed to do that. Yeah. So it's
something interesting, isn't it? Because inside what you're saying, because you mentioned a couple of times this time you had with yourself, and the fact that you chose to do half of the final marathon by yourself. I can't begin to imagine how many thoughts you must have had on all of those 128 marathons, then the number of minutes you've had in your own mind. But at the same time, you kept it going. So something was there, right? Like something was happening. And running is a powerful tool, right? And you said at the beginning, you actually came up with the idea whilst running. Yeah. There's so many things here that's like joining the power of running into one point. And there are countries across the world that, you know, essentially prescribe time in nature like as a tool to help people's mental health.
90% of my runs were on trails or in nature. It definitely helped along the way. And like you say, you know, there was definitely bad days. And there's a lot of lessons that I've learned through the running every single day that I'll carry for the rest of my life. There's one in particular where if I was ever having a really bad day during the marathons, I used to tell myself, get through the next 2 days. And I was always telling myself that you don't get 3 bad days. And at the beginning, it was just to help me get through a pretty day. But before I knew it, I'd used that maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times. And every time it worked, that I never had 3 bad days in a row. And there was definitely an element of, you know, if I'm really in pain, I'm out there on my own, I'm in my own thoughts and just trying to keep positive. And I used to tell myself, you don't get 3 bad days. And it got me through some pretty tough times.
This is really interesting because this idea of not having 3 bad days, the process of you telling yourself that and then doing the action of running then meant that you didn't have the third bad day. So you know that for yourself.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful.
Yeah.
Like, that could be there's a lot of transferable kind of knowledge within that idea that could be applied to a lot of things.
Yeah. And it sounded cliche and cheesy when I was telling myself at first, but I watched it happen over so many cycles of feeling down or really struggling. Yeah. And those don't have 3 bad days. I use now all the time if I'm feeling a bit crap. Just get through the next couple of days.
Kind of like positive self-talk that sometimes gets kind of belittled, I think. But actually, it's proven that it can work in the most difficult of challenges. Yeah. And I also think again, we keep going back to it, this idea of community and what that's done to you and your family, but also the people who have joined a community they didn't even know that they were in. And it's not, community is not the town, not the city, but actually how people feel when they're around other people, whether that's online or whether that's through, physically going out and supporting you on your final kind of day of running. I think as a society, we are entering into a difficult period of time. There are significant challenges when it comes to financial difficulties, cost of living, job uncertainties, the rise of AI, let alone just the geopolitical tensions that we see in the world that mean that our lives might be disrupted. I can't help but think the most important thing that we've all got an ability to do is build some form of community around these topics. And what's next for you in terms of this community building idea?
So, when I was doing the marathons, I thought, never again. I will never do anything like this ever again. And that was when I was in the midst of it. But like you say, having built, I guess I can say, built a bit of a community.
Totally can.
Locally within where I live, but also wider than that online. Having finished doing this challenge and reflecting on some of the messages I've received and some of the people that have been so positively impacted, I'd love to do something similar again. Maybe not the same size. I'd never do 6 months. That was too much. I couldn't hack another 6-month challenge, but I'd love to maybe be able to take the time off work and remove that logistical element and do another challenge, and continue building a bit of a community and continue sharing my story. Which I think one that I've got in the back of my mind is running from LA to New York, which has still got that sort of link to New York, link to Connor, but a slightly different challenge. I think it's less miles than what I've just done.
Really?
So I did 3,300 miles. I think LA to New York is 2,900.
So that puts it into perspective.
So it's less miles, but it's probably a bit more challenging and a little bit more sort of time off work and things like that. So in terms of building a community, I'd love to be able to put myself out there again, continue sharing the story of Connor and continue putting things online that hopefully impact people positively.
What would need to happen to get you to go from LA to New York or vice versa?
So there's definitely a sort of financial element that, I funded the whole challenge myself during the 128 marathons, but that was just trainers, clothes, food. That was about it, really. But to go from LA to New York would require some sort of financial support, really. You've got to rent RVs, you've got a lot of more logistical challenges than what I previously had, plus taking time out of work to dedicate to the challenge. So that's probably what I would need to get me there.
Have you worked out how many days that would be?
It depends how many miles I do a day.
True.
So
you can't,
I'm not going to put anything out there yet.
Because when you say it,
because then I say it and then I have to do it. But I'd aim for more than a marathon a day. So I'd aim for more miles in a day, but less days. Personally, I think that would be...
You say it like that's a very easy thing to do.
Personally, I just think that would be... I got through the first week of daily marathons and I had 18 weeks to go. So for me, the mental challenge of the length of it was a lot more. So if I can do more miles in a day, I think it'll be easier to consume in my brain. That's what I'm telling myself.
It's funny that you just go straight to brain. Like your body is like, yeah, fine.
Yeah. Well, it's a mental thing, really. Yeah. It's completely a mental thing. I'm sure the body will catch up, but you've got to tell yourself that you can do it.
Yeah. And you go through some fantastic places on the way on that route as well, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of people that have done it before, and I think it's a really nice way to raise money and continue a bit of a community, but in a different part of the world. I was running every day and there was people that would see me out every day, and that built its own little community.
Yeah, nice.
And I think going through America would give me another opportunity to continue building that sort of community of people that have maybe been bereaved by suicide or that sort of feel a connection towards it. And I think it would be a really nice thing to do in memory of Connor. So
yeah, I think so.
Maybe in the near future.
Yeah, near future. Well, let's continue the conversation on that one.
Yeah.
Why was it New York? I know obviously Connor wanted to live and he saw his life in New York. Do you know why that was? I know everyone loves New York, but like...
So he'd been sort of 7 times before he passed away. So really
wow.
Between the age of 18 to 21. So Connor was 21 when he passed away. He'd been 7 or 8 times. So I think he'd just been once. And he just loved the whole big city vibe. He liked the busyness, the craziness. And that's just where he loved to be. And whenever I look back at photos or think of conversations, that was always where he sort of spoke about most passionately. And when you look at photos, that's where he seemed happiest. So I think he just liked the whole craziness of it. Not that I've never been.
I was going to ask you that, yeah.
Yeah, never been.
Do you have plans to go?
So I'm doing the New York Marathon in November, which I would genuinely say is a bigger challenge for me than the 128 days. Emotionally, I never ever thought I would go. My fiance always wanted to go to New York with me, and I always said never. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Even thinking about it makes me emotional. But I got the opportunity to do the New York Marathon, having done the 128 days, and I think it's maybe just the next step for me in a bit of a journey of grief. So although I'll push myself, and physically the marathon is a challenge, but getting on the flight and actually arriving in New York will be more of a challenge than anything I've done yet for me.
Because of the sheer love and connection you have with your brother in New York?
Yeah, so this sounds daft to say, but there's also an element of, I sometimes like to think that that's where Connor maybe is. And I think if I go to New York, it might kill off that hope that he's just living his life in New York. And that's why I've always wanted to put it off. So for me, it's going to be quite a challenge really to go there and do the marathon. But I'm going to do it.
It's incredibly powerful. So that kind of idea of, that's like almost like your mind helping you kind of
almost
some
helping
pain.
cope. Yeah, definitely. And I've always not wanted to cut that off. And it sounds daft, but in going to New York, I feel like I might have done that. But when I got the opportunity, ever since doing these marathons, any opportunity that's ever came my way, I feel like I just need to grab with 2 hands. Connor wanted to live in New York. He never got that opportunity. So if I get an opportunity to go to New York and do the marathon, I'm going to do it. So
I think it's incredibly powerful, and it's very hard, I think, for people to make sense of that. Like imagining, another reality for somebody. But I used to fall asleep as a young boy after I lose my dad, and I'd live a different life in my head. But it was every think like, you'd think naturally, you lose your dad to suicide at 12, and I'd have really bad dreams and nightmares. Yeah. It was the most soothing experience. I would literally be living with my dad night after night, and I would be like, wake up, and I'd be upset because like, oh yeah, it's not real. And then I would, and I'd never had problems sleeping my whole life. And I've never really heard anyone actually explain that like that. And I didn't know you were going to share anything like that today, right? And so it is a very powerful thing, like what our mind can do to us with such extreme grief and trauma. But I wish you the best of luck for New York. I'm sure you're going to have to fly by the marathon part anyway, but the actual physically going, getting out of the airport, going through the landmarks and all types of things like that. But when is it? November the 3rd. November the 3rd. Yeah.
So I've got the entrance, but I need to book flights and hotels. I've looked, but it's an absolute fortune.
It is a bit, isn't it?
But yeah, we'll definitely go, and I'll try and enjoy it. Try and make a holiday out of it. We've got a couple of days either side of the marathon, and it'll be difficult, going to landmarks, knowing that Con had been there. Yeah. There's so many photos that I've got of Connor there as well, so it'll be hard to see the place and not see him there.
Not see that, yeah. I can relate in as much as I can do on that. But no, what an incredible thing! And how did you get offered a place, or how did that? I should have asked.
So it actually happened through someone who works for London Marathon, who lives in Newcastle, and they'd seen what I was doing, and they get 2 entrants to every world major. and they were willing to give me one. So
That
it
is
was really kind. Yeah,
very kind of that person.
yeah, definitely. So pretty cool, because it's a challenge to get into it in itself.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Just as hard as getting in the London Marathon, I think, if not more.
Yeah. It's nice to see, isn't it, how hard it is, though, in some ways. Because I know obviously you want to give everyone that moment to get into these kind of major marathons. Just the fact that so many people gain from putting themselves through these challenges.
I know. I think for the London as well this year, it's the most entries they've ever had. It was like 750,000.
I did it, but I didn't get him.
Yeah, I didn't get any.
But anyway, you didn't get him.
No.
Okay, no one's going to get him. But no, incredible. Like such a... Yeah, it really is incredible. I'm sure so many people will be taking inspiration of that in their kind of day to day, just kind of getting out, getting moving. You talk about the Couch to 5K. It's such a good example, isn't it? It's kind of always that tool that somebody can have in their kind of back pocket when they need to. And I don't think there's any surprise why so many running groups popping up. Like it's good for you. It's good for the community. It's good for the businesses that set them up. Like you can see everyone wins from these things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just physically moving during those times is such a powerful thing. So I'm excited to see what you go on to do next. I think this LA kind of hope will happen. I can see that there's a few things that are going to need to happen for you to be able to do it. But you're on such an incredible kind of pathway to honouring your brother, which you have done in no physical way that you can do anymore, but also for other people who can't do what you're doing, but see their grief in you and what you've done. So just complete hats off. I can't put it into words, but we have a set of recurring questions that we ask every guest. You can choose not to answer them. You can choose to answer them in long form, short form, whatever you like to do. But what's one societal default you would completely rewrite if you could?
So for me, I don't really like to talk about mental health when it's just men, because I think it affects everyone. But there's definitely a societal default where guys don't really like to talk. Among mates, we'll often go to friends and be like, "Oh, you're right, mate." They'll respond, "Yeah, I'm good. How are you?" And it's very surface level. So if there was a societal default that I could remove, it would definitely be the men's mental health side of things, and just being able to show a bit of emotion and being able to tell someone how you feel as a guy and not feel any shame. And I don't think I do. Personally, I think I've managed to find a way to do that, whether that be through the marathons or sort of being online and things like that. But there's 1,000,000% people out there that don't have that same output that I have. So I think men's mental health and men being able to open up and share how they feel and be a little bit more vulnerable without feeling that element of shame or that they can't do it would be one that I would want to remove.
Is there a belief that you used to hold about mental health or masculinity that you've let go of?
One that I always remember vividly is being in school and getting talks, and people would come in and talk about mental health. And I remember sitting there thinking, what on earth has this got to do with me? Why do I need to listen to this? I've got better things to be doing. And then lo and behold, within 6 months, there I was, probably should have listened a little bit more. So I guess the belief that I have now is that it can happen to anyone. And, you don't have to have had a troubled background or have had some sort of specific difficult life experience. I think for my brother, it was a number of things that piled on top of one another, and individually probably didn't actually have that much of an impact, but together they did. So for me, my belief now is that you've got no idea what's going through someone's brain, and everyone's got stuff going on at home. Everyone's got issues, and trying to be a little bit more aware of that is something that I now take on board, having lost my brother to suicide.
Is there something that you've never publicly shared on anything around mental health or suicide, but perhaps feel ready to now? You don't have to answer this.
Probably the only thing that I've never shared is what I just shared earlier on in the conversation, was about not wanting to go to New York because of my hope that Connor maybe was there. So maybe not necessarily about mental health or suicide, but more just something that I've never shared personally about my experience with suicide, was that I wanted to believe that Connor was maybe somewhere else, and that's what put me off going to New York. I've never really shared that before.
I appreciate you sharing that. You can see it kind of caught me off guard as well, because I found myself going on a deep thought about something very similar, but it is, it kind of brings a whole new dimension to like grief.
Yeah.
but incredible what you're now going on to do in November, which I kind of want to be there with you cheering you on. But like you said, it's not an easy feat, is it, getting there and staying?
Definitely not. Definitely
especially
not.
That weekend.
Yeah, it's probably the most expensive weekend of the year.
Yeah, anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so some closing thoughts. So as we consider the world we're in, and I kind of alluded to that on a couple of points earlier, if we were to record this in 10 years' time, what do you hope we're talking about? But perhaps what do you worry we might be talking about?
Perhaps I hope that we're talking about the sort of default in society that we have questioned and successfully questioned and managed to achieve. But I probably do worry that we'll be having similar conversations in 10 years' time. I think there definitely has been a shift, and the sort of awareness around mental health and suicide is a lot stronger than what it was maybe even from when Connor passed away, sort of 7 or 8 years ago. And I do think everyone's on a journey themselves to try and understand that a little bit better. And to be honest, the more people that we have that talk about their experience and their feelings and how they've been affected by suicide, I think it's only the better. And hopefully that we'll get there one day. Maybe not 10 years, but podcasts like these, there's plenty of other podcasts out there that really do share a positive message. Especially for guys.
Yeah.
And I think it can only be a good thing.
Incredible. And slightly rogue, but every time we've asked this rogue question, it's always opened up interesting conversations. So his final question, AI is of course impacting our world in multiple ways and seems to be intersecting the everyday person's life quite at speed. As you reflect on that, do you have any hopes around AI? And what are your thoughts when it comes to the future for your loved ones and yourself when it comes to AI?
It's a funny one because I actually do quite like it. ChatGPT and me are great friends. I use it all the time. Mm-hmm. And I do understand people get worried about AI and what might happen. For me, I don't really have that worry yet. But I use it through work. I mean, we have Copilot allowed at work. I use it through daily activities, generating images, answering questions. I might probably use it more than Google. So it can be a useful tool, but I can understand why people get scared. But I'm not sure we're quite at the point of robots going to take over the world through AI. But there's a lot of good use in it. There's a lot of online chats that can use AI. I'm sure that there'd be a way to use AI to help with outreach and mental health, and there's a lot of good use if it's used in the right way. I think that's what I would say.
See, every time I ask it was an interesting conversation because it's you say ChatGPT as a friend is quite interesting. It's the first thing you went to quickly, but it's that it does make sense, right? But I completely hear you. Not at the point of robots taking over the world. Just yet.
Not quite there.
Not quite there. But no, rightly so. We have to have hesitancy around the points that you mentioned. But I do think there is a role that AI can play in helping prevent suicide, and also the direct support around mental health. Do I think it should replace? Absolutely not. But no, I guess a huge thank you for coming on. Believe it or not, we've gone over quite a bit actually. Sometimes it might not feel like it, but a really, really fascinating conversation. You have really kind of given me new insight today, but also I'm sure a lot of people listening in. And I want to kind of keep supporting you and helping you on the journey that you now have as joint Newcastle fans, which you probably alluded to enough. Hopefully there'll be more hope and joy for us in the coming season ahead. But if not, nice. I'm glad that that we have met, and I'm glad that you were able to do what you have done and what you're going to do when it comes to New York. And just a huge thank you for what you've done for people in the Northeast and everyone else.
No, likewise. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been great, and it's always a pleasure to share my story, and hopefully this is not the end of our collaboration.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
What an amazing conversation that was. A solo mission to honour his brother that turned into a huge, organically growing mission that connected so many people across the Northeast and in time, the whole of the UK. One of the most memorable moments, I think, in 2025 when it comes to suicide prevention. I think Lewis and what he and his family have endured, and the pain is sadly not unique. It is a grief that connects so many people across the UK, but often we experience that grief in silence. I think what Lewis has done, perhaps in the most kind of magical and powerful way that I think I've witnessed is actually doing what he loves, which is running, what his family love, which is running. But in doing so, just speaking organically and naturally to camera has meant that actually he's built a community in a troubled part of the UK when it comes to suicide risk. You know, the northeast of England has the highest rate of suicides. So, you know, for someone to take that upon his shoulders and kind of use his own grief and pain and his family's grief and pain to do what he's done is incredible. I think what it shows is the power of community. I think we're, of course, living in a world that has so much change and turbulence at the heart of it. I think we need to remind ourselves what keeps us human, reminding ourselves that actually human connection is a part of suicide prevention. And I think in communities across the UK, the one thing that we all have is people and spaces and environments where we can bring people together. And, you know, I don't think there is a huge surprise why there are so many running communities and clubs that exist around movement. I think, you know, there is science and research to show that moving whilst talking about mental health and well-being is good. You're more likely to have conversations when you are side by side with someone. You know, this idea of looking someone in the eyes directly and talking to them about their kind of deepest, most kind of troubled moments is actually unlikely to open up conversations. Like being side by side, being able to look and walk and move actually gives us a better chance to talk. So what a powerful thing is on so many levels that actually, you know, he was able to have conversations with people about suicide and mental health whilst running. Like the kind of amount of things that are positive about that movement is incredible. I think, you know, what Lewis is trying to do globally with this next, you know, going out to New York, running the New York Marathon, and how he described that is harder for him than what he has experienced is kind of really kind of sat quite deeply within me, thinking about that he's going to have to relive his brother's footsteps and at the same time run a marathon. Like it's almost like that's the easy part. And you know, he comes across like that, right? You know, he says how easy it is, the running part is the mental battle. But, you know, I want to help Lewis. I think we can come together and help Lewis on his mission. What ways can we as a community see how we can support Lewis on his goal of running from the LA to New York? I think there's more to be said, though. I think Lewis is someone that clearly has so much knowledge about what it feels like to grieve over that period of time. Sibling loss is something, sadly, which, you know, I've met many people who've experienced sibling loss by suicide, and I think there's more that needs to be said, more that needs to be done to understand some of that grief. And, you know, we started the conversation talking about some of those moments, on the hours and days leading up to Conor's passing, and I think we have to do more to understand those moments. But at the same time, you know, hats off for what Lewis has done, and hopefully he'll be back on again in the near future.